Hi, my name is Blaine Dillard, and I live in Wake County, North Carolina. And I've created this report, and I wanted to take you through it because it's quite a bit to digest just by reading. So I'm calling this a citizens report because I'm a citizen and I love data, and I like to investigate data and try to understand what makes up the numbers. The purpose of this presentation is to really dig into some of the Wake County data, Wake County Public School System data, and really try to use the publicly available data from the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction and just try to explain what I've learned and just to give additional context where possible. I've always believed that you get what you inspect, not what you expect. And I think metrics and analytics are very important when analyzing any organization, business, or government entity. So that's why I have done this. um, I've got several guiding principles, and I hate to just read these to you, but I really feel like publicly available data is where we should start first. There's hundreds of thousands of rows of data put out each year by the DPI, and I'd like to try to use that as much as possible. And then I think that anything that needs to vary from that, or any kind of custom tweaks that need to be made from that, need to be well explained whenever anything like that's published. So that's a practice I like to adhere to as much as I can. So this presentation will be citing publicly available data from the NCDPI. I understand that some of the metric definitions have changed from year to year, and sometimes we have to take that into consideration, and also there's ways to to work around that. I think using ratios of district data or local data to sort of a baseline or a normal group of test takers, such as the state, can help normalize that phenomena. The DPI will express some scores that are higher than 95. They just reflect those as greater than 95. And in those cases, I'll use calculations. I'll use 95 and put it in red whenever I've had to do that, because they don't give numbers 96, 97, 98, etc. They'll just say greater than 95, which obviously can't be used in a calculation because it's not a number. You have to convert it to a number. And same thing for anything less than 5. I'll use 5 in those cases, and I'll put it in red whenever that happens. All right, let's move on here. I've got a lot of sources. Most of these are right off the North Carolina publicschools.org website, the accountability website. If you follow that first link, you'll get to many files, including the ones listed here. So I'm trying to show the ones starting in 2015 through 16 school year, up to the most recent school year through 2019. And then there's other files here as well. And then there's also this Board of Education meeting presentation that was given on September 17th. I'll be sort of pivoting off of some slides in that deck, and then digging in quite a bit deeper into those charts. This is just my disclaimer here. I've spent a lot of time on this the last month or so. A lot of hours, and I've learned a lot. I've asked a lot of questions. I've crunched a lot of numbers. I've done a lot of manual manipulation of data to move it from big Excel files into smaller Excel files, and lots of Excel maneuvers and copies and sorts and filters. And so I've tried to be sure that I'm accurate, but there's always a chance I made a mistake. So if you see a mistake, please report that to me. And I appreciate the help from Brad McMillan and Curtis Sonneman, who've answered many of my questions, and also to Hava Edelstein for collaboration and brainstorming. All right, let's move on. So references. These are some of the subgroup codes, acronyms that you'll see in the DPI data sets. I wanted to put a reference in for that. There's also definitions for GLP and CCR, which are two main metrics that are used for the state when they are measuring end of grade and end of course testing. And that's about it for that page. Also using some data from Chapel Hill. Chapel Hill is a small district. They are, well, I'd say Wake County is about 13 times the size of Chapel Hill, but Chapel Hill is in many of the state assessments and rankings they're usually number one, or very close to number one. So they are a great example of scoring well. As long as we can learn from them, we should try to learn from them. It does not to say that everything they do we should do, because again, we're 13 times the size of Chapel Hill, but it is worth looking at their data. They are a nearby county to us, and so I pulled their data in just to give a comparison to how we compare to another usually high performing district. All right, so let's start to dig into it. So this chart here is the one presented at the Board of Education on September 17th. This is page 10 of that presentation, and it is showing the delta or the difference between the Wake County proficiency result, which is the GLP, the grade level proficiency, and the state, the North Carolina grade level proficiency for the same test assessment, whether it's EOG or EOC. And so if you look at this chart just casually, you would say, wow, we're leading the state in every one of these subjects except grade 5 science. So that would be the conclusion you would have on this chart. And I think it deserves digging in a little further just to see, how did we get here? What's, is this normal? Is this going up, going down, or where have we been before this to get to this point? So the next several pages are going to look at the 4-year trends of that data. So each chart that we're going to look at is going to show the GLP on the left, the CCR on the right, and it's going to show 3 bar graphs for each of those. It's going to show the as-is numbers from the DPI for both North Carolina, Wake, and Chapel Hill, and we'll indicate the DPI code that was used for the metric. It'll show the difference between those two numbers. And then where possible, I'll show you the number that was on this chart. I'll circle the ones that I find that I was able to tie out and match, which is, that's what we want to see. We want to see, being able to match, the DPI data with what is published by the county. So we'll also show the 4-year trend if it's available. And then in those cases where there's numbers that are decimals, and I'll round them in some cases just to make sure they fit on the chart. And then where there's more room, I'll use decimal numbers. So you'll see that in a moment. So we'll jump right in. We'll start with 3rd grade math. We'll just kind of work across that bar chart from left to right. Again, each of these charts will show the sources up in the top right corner. Shows where I got these 2016 and 2017 data. That was called EOG Math 3 in those 2 respective data sets. And in 2018 and 19, the data was called MA03. So pulling those 4 data points from those 4 Excel files for those 4 years, again for these 3 locations, the state, Wake County, and Chapel Hill, and then again for GLP and CCR, I'm able to pull this chart together. I pulled out all these numbers, put it in a spreadsheet, calculated the differences that, just subtracting the 2 numbers, showing Wake County minus North Carolina, and then Chapel Hill minus North Carolina. And then I show the difference expressed as a percent as well. So that's calculated by just doing district minus state divided by the state. So this gives you sort of a relative number of how this performs. And then again, as I promised, this number here is the 2019 difference of 5 for 3rd grade math, and that is the number that showed on the previous chart here. So there's the 5. So that one matched up. Then we go into 4th grade math. So we see, again, the numbers are pretty consistent from year to year, and here's the delta of 8. And then 6 for 5th grade math, then 6th grade math, 7th grade math. Okay, now we're starting to get into some cases where some explaining is needed to be done. 8th grade math. This was a change in 2018 with 8th grade math. In 2016 and 17, all 8th graders took the EOG, which is the end of grade test. And then there were also Math 1 students who perhaps were in 8th grade or in middle school, but they would also take the EOC for Math 1. So here you have a case of some 8th graders having to take 2 different tests, sort of end of course or end of grade tests. So these numbers for 16 and 17 reflect students that took both of these tests. So if they were a Math 1 student, they also took the EOG. So the numbers for 2016 and 17 are going to include these 8th graders who took both the tests. Then when we go to 18 and 19, the state started, they changed the rule to where the students, they didn't have to take both tests. Either, if they were in Math 1, they just take the Math 1 EOC. If they're in 8th grade and not taking Math 1, they would take the 8th grade EOG. So in that case, they took one or the other. But what this metric is for 2018 and 19 is the MA08 metric. And what that is, it's a DPI calculated blend of scores from the 8th graders who took, some took the EOG, and then some took the Math 1 EOC. Okay, so it's sort of a blending of those two numbers that the DPI provides for us. So in that case, the number for 2019 is actually the 7 here, which is that blended MA08 number, and that does match the Wake County chart. Okay. Now, if we go to the other, there is another spin of the 8th grade number. They also introduced in 2018 a new number called M8 SEP, and that is that's the 8th graders who took the EOG only, and it's just showing them. So it's breaking them out of that prior number. So instead of the MA08 number, which contains a blend of EOG takers and EOC takers in 8th grade, this one is just showing the EOG takers. So no surprise here, and I'll put a comment on it. The reason you see a drop in all three of these groups is because all of a sudden here, this batch of students in 2018 and 19, that batch of students does not include the Math 1 kids. And those are the kids who are typically higher achievers. They're taking Math 1 in 8th grade or even sooner. And so you take those kids out of the equation in 8th grade. The kids who are remaining are the, for the lack of a better word, they're the average kids. They're the other kids that are not advancing, into Math 1 in middle school. So therefore, for all these groups, those numbers went down. So an interesting thing to see here is when you look at Wake County's number in that particular population, is now our numbers are negative, our difference numbers. So when we compare to the state, we are below the state on this Math 8 SEP number. Okay, so again, these are 8th graders taking 8th grade math, not taking Math 1. Okay, so these numbers are below the state in comparison. Same for college and career ready. See the same phenomena over there. So now let's move on to Math 3. I skipped Math 1, and I believe, so I took my Math 1 chart out. We'll cover that ad nauseum at a later point. That'll actually be a separate video. But this one is skipping on to Math 3. This is the first year we did a Math 3 EOC, and therefore you only see 1 year's worth of data on this chart. And again, that number matches the bar chart from Wake County. Now we're switching over to reading, 3rd grade reading. We're matching there, matching there. We match there, and there, and there, and there. Okay, so this is all good that we're matching. I'm glad to see I can find and tie out to the Wake County chart number. Now, biology was accidentally omitted from the Wake County chart. Honest mistake, but I did call it out here. I wanted to make sure we cover it. But that number, that delta there for 2019 is 6. And then we're up to 5th grade science. Now, this is sort of a surprise because this is a case where there's no new way to that the group of science students in 5th grade are being considered like Math 8th grade was, but yet our numbers in Wake County as compared to the state have steadily declined. We were not that much ahead in first place, in 2016, but steadily that number has gone down to where we are now, slightly trailing the state in 5th grade science proficiency. And then we're right even with the state on college or career readiness. And I would have to wonder why that is, because this county is, again, this population is all 5th graders taking the science EOG. So I don't understand why we would be below the state in any such assessment, because I believe our families here are rather science savvy, and I think they have children who would do pretty well in science. 8th grade science, a little bit better. We're still ahead of the state, and we have been for the whole 4 years. We are trending downward, but there we are. Okay, So there we've been going through all of those roughly 18 delta charts. And so here's kind of the trend. In the GLP, if you were paying attention and keeping score, we had our delta lead over the state decline in every single one of those subjects for Wake County. So from 2016 to current 2019, we went down in every one of those subjects. And then for CCR, we had our delta lead decline in 13 out of the 16 subjects. We increased in 3 or one of the years, one of the subjects we were tied, but we increased or stayed the same for 3 out of the 16. The average lead went from 9.4 to 6.6 for GLP, and for CCR 10.6 to 8.3. Now, so overall trend on the comparison to state is down. That's the point of that. Then the other interesting thing here is if you look at all of the subjects, our largest lead for any of those subjects for any of those years was 2016. The top two there were math grade 6 and math grade 7. So we were dominating the state as far as these scores go for GLP and CCR, and there's no other subject that did as well as those two subjects during this 4-year period. And then, it's worth noting those same students in math, again, we were dominating the state then. Those would have completed the 9th grade. The 6th graders would have completed the 9th grade this past year, and the 7th graders would have completed the 10th grade. So roughly, my assumption here is that some of our historically strongest math students, as compared to the state, are among our recent Math 1 test takers. That's my assumption there. I'm sure there's exceptions to that, but that is what I think I'm sort of seeing here is we were a very strong leader in math in 2016 for this particular class of students, these two particular classes. And this is just another chart just kind of enumerating a lot of the numbers I just talked through. And then so if we go back and redo that chart and just sort of show the 2016 versus 2019 GLP deltas, again, all these numbers match in blue except biology, which wasn't on the Wake County chart. All of these are the numbers. You can see we've gone down in every one of these subjects. Math 1, we'll talk about that at a later time, so we're going to put that one off. And then CCR, the Wake County chart did not include CCR, but I'm including it here. And then you can see, subject by subject, how we did there as well. Sort of the summary of this section is, I think just showing a chart that says, hey, we lead the state in all these subjects without any additional context. I think that's sort of like, saying you paid your bills on time. It's, it's like, what big deal. I mean, it's good that we would lead the state. I'm no doubt about that. But I'm just, I'm thinking it doesn't carry a lot of weight unless there's some additional context around that kind of tells, is that an anomaly? Is that normal? Is that trending up, trending down? I just feel like we need some more context around a chart like that. I think, in my opinion, well-educated people in Wake County, I think we should lead the state in every subject. So maybe that's too high of an expectation, but that's my belief. That's always been my perception of this county. Then on the Board of Education chart showing the leads over this subject over the past 4 years, I think when we're going down in every one of these subjects in GLP, I think that indicates there's some issue. I think someone should look at that as a big picture item. Why are we going down in every one of these subjects, or is there some explanation for it? So I think we should look at that. And then I already mentioned science. I don't know why we would be below the state in science. So again, I think STEM careers, other well-educated parents here, science should be a strong subject and math as well for our families. Chapel Hill, they've got huge leads over the state on just about all these subjects. You could almost argue they would have to go down. But even they, with their high, levels, they, didn't lose as much ground as consistently as Wake County did. Okay, so that's it for this part of the presentation. The other part I'm going to try to explain is this next subject here, and I'll cut this at this point now. Thank you.